Hello everybody and welcome back to CAS Inspire. Today's session is CAS Inspire Fantastic cross-curricular ways to teach about climate change in your primary classroom. My name is Will Franklin and I am the host for today's session. During the session, please use the question window on the right-hand side of your screen to ask any questions, and if we have time at the end, I will pass them on to our two hosts. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you use social media, the hashtag for this event is CAS Inspire. Without further ado, let me introduce the panel today. This afternoon, I'm delighted to be joined by Rebecca Hindle and Richard Smith. After working in the events industry for 14 years, Rebecca decided to fulfill a lifelong passion and retrain as a primary school teacher. She is now in her second year of teaching, currently working as a Year 3 class teacher. Rebecca strives to deliver a broad and creative curriculum by giving all learning the context it has within the wider world. She believes that children become far more inspired and motivated if they can see how their time at school will contribute to their own lives far beyond their school years. Richard Smith started his own business, Amazing ICT, 11 years ago. He works with 3 other people to help staff and students with computing, e-safety and robotics. He works in 4 schools each week and helps to run the Telford CAS Mixed Community. So I'm now going to pass over to Richard, who's going to start us off today. Richard.
Well, great to see you all here, and thanks for joining us, and thanks for that introduction, Will. So what we're going to do is we're going to try in the next 25 minutes to address 3 things: where to find free resources that you can use in school, where to access affordable equipment, and events you could host in your class or school linked to climate change. So what we've got here is we've got a simple image, and I just want to talk to you about the power of images. So this has been created by somebody who's then shared it via Creative Commons, and there will be a hyperlink in the PDF that we will send you. And what you can do is you can then download that and then you can adapt it. So in this case over here, you can see I've added a solar panel. So to get that solar panel, I use something called Top PNG. And for those people that don't know, the important thing about a PNG is it's transparent. So you can see there isn't a white border around it. So you can then move this to where you want. So it's really good to get your own resources and know they're copyright free, because obviously schools can get into trouble if they share images that aren't copyright free. I use Flickr a lot, and Flickr is good for real photographs. So I live in Telford, and this is an example of a solar panel in Telford, and it's excellent because what you get is on a lot of Flickr pages, they say you can use their particular images. And that's a lot more powerful in that you can see the rows of solar panels, you can tell the students where it's from. So for you, you would search Flickr, and then you would choose your town and perhaps type in solar panels. And also, I try to link things to local news. So in this case, you can see there's a link to our local paper there. So this has been created for you. And as I say, we've put the link down the bottom. So I've used this in 2 schools. So basically, I've got the background of Scratch, and we've put some facts in as a group. And what we've done is we've adapted it so when the sun moves, so you could click on the sun would move, and the sunlight would shine on the solar panel, and then it would turn the laptop on. So it's interactive. But the important thing with Scratch is that when you click on that, you could take the blocks apart, and then you could remix it and make it your own, so that it wasn't a completed project. So you could just have the different objects, in this case they're called sprites, and you could have part of the code done, and then the children would be asked to complete the rest. So we'll send you that link, and that's all live now. So one thing, as I've referred to before, is it's important to respect people's creative work. So in this example, we've gone on a search engine, in this case Google, we type wind turbine, and then under more, you've got all these different things. And it's really useful to have different colors. So if you were doing a historical project, you could choose black and white. But in this case, we chose Creative Commons licenses, and then we've chosen that. So the pictures that then appear, you'll be allowed to use and download. This is the next thing I want to talk to you about, which is Tinkercad. And Tinkercad I use in all 4 of my schools. It's a free computer-aided design package that allows you to design in 3D. And in this case, one of the year 4s has designed a very simple solar panel. Now on the CAS Inspire site and on the main CAS site, I've created 2 videos that show you the process of creating this, and they're 5 minutes each, so these will be able to be used in school. They're not there yet, but they'll be there in the next couple of weeks. The beautiful thing about Tinkercad is it works on any device, and you can rotate, you can copy and paste, and you can see this also links with maths because we've got some arrays here, so it's a 3x3 array. Once you've done one solar panel, you can actually highlight the whole thing and copy the whole thing. One useful thing to do before you copy it is to group it. So you would group all the objects. So here you've got 12 rectangles. So you put a box around it and group it. That means that that's one object, so it'll easily duplicate. And then you can create your own solar farm, and you can talk about efficiency. And you'd refer to a local solar farm to have a look at about how many panels were there. And you could link it with science because you could talk about how much energy was created in terms of one solar panel, but also for this whole solar farm. And then you could talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of solar energy. In this case, again, I'm on Google, but I put a question in. Does Tinkercad have solar panels? ? And yes, it does. This is what came up. So this would be really lovely. So you could download this. You'd have to create your own free account. You could download it, and then you could share that with the children so they could use one of these solar panels, make it smaller perhaps, and try and fit 8 of them on this roof. Once you've created your own free Tinkercad account, you can create a classroom, and that's what I do. So I created my own account, and then I create a classroom. I copy and paste the children's names in, and then they get their own unique code so they can log in and I can see exactly what they're doing. And this is quite interesting, and I think this is quite new. When you type in solar panel, it actually gives you some other suggestions of what you might want to search for. So for the older children, they might start to look at circuits. You can actually create some circuits in Tinkercad now. What else could be designed? So I designed a solar panel, and then in one of my schools, one of the children said, could they try a wind turbine? Well, I must admit, their wind turbine is superb. This was year 5 that did this, and they had about 20 minutes. And in the newsletter and blog post that I'm doing for the CAS site, there's an interview with the child as well, so you can see how they went about the process. So there's going to be a newsletter, a blog post, and 2 videos, and they will be on the Computing at School main page. On to some equipment. I've got 2 bits of equipment to tell you about today. This is very, very reasonable. It's £11.22. Schools won't have to pay VAT. I had to pay £4 delivery, but I got all this equipment, and I don't know if you can see that, but this solar panel is quite nice and big. Oh, it's making a noise. I wonder why that is. Yes, there's a sounder connected to it. It's quite dark here in Telford, but you might be able to just hear a bit of sound. And if you look at the back of this, I love it because you get a little spanner and you can actually connect. So in this case, I'm connected across all three of the solar panels here. So I've got 4.5 volts, and it shows you the voltage. Oh, it's making a bit of noise again. There we go. And I love it because the lighter it is, the higher pitch the sound. So that's a really good introduction for any age students, even reception year 1, they can understand that. So they could go around and find the best places to put a solar panel. And you get motors and lights, and they're all very well constructed. And that's for £11.22. I'm not on commission, don't worry, I just love it. The second one I want to tell you about is from Monk Makes. Now this is really lovely because you get a solar panel, and this actually has a maximum output of 10 volts, but you also get a solar store. And this is the only one that I found to be very, very reliable, easy to set up, that's got this solar store. And if you think of our solar panels, our solar farm in Telford, they would need to store the energy. And the bonus of this is you can also control a micro bit with it. So that's really good. That is, I'm afraid I haven't got the price on there. So maybe, Will, you could just do a bit of research, and I think it's about £30. But I would suggest the school buys just one and tries it out, and then see how it goes. And you've got 6 experiments that you can set up in there. And again, I found that to be beautifully designed and very useful. And I put the link in the bottom. So some event ideas, and I think these would go down really well, and I've tried to make them as simple or as complicated as your school wishes to make them. So we could have a climate change showcase. So by that we would focus on a certain area. So it could be hydroelectric, wind power, or solar panel, and we try to link it to some local issues. There are some really good resources in Barefoot, and in the Barefoot site, it even shows you how to use a free bit of software called Paint with a Z on the end, Paint with a Z on the end, to do your own marketing products as well. We could have an energy event for families, and at this event, you could try and get some local companies to come and talk about energy saving devices, or some government agencies. Videos of creative work. So you could get the children to make some videos of things like Tinkercad, where they're creating a solar panel, and put them on your social media site or on your school website. An online discussion with your local authority. And this link here gives you a score for your local authority. So I'm glad to say Telford comes 3rd out of all unitary authorities. But next to me, we've got Shropshire, and that gets a less good score. So that could be something that you could use across a number of subjects, and you could look at data as well and link that to the computing, data and information units. Invite local radio to discuss climate change. I found that local radio loves to come into schools because the interviews tend to be lively, and they're always keen to show that they're part of the community. So perhaps invite one in and get them to say, we're doing a climate change day, would you like to come in and interview the children or the teachers or the local companies? And the last one, produce a podcast that can be shared. So I use just a free, it's just a free app on an iPad, and then it saves it as an MP3, and then I put them online. The only proviso here is if you use something like SoundCloud, which is a podcast channel, you've got to be very careful because people can search for anything on there, and there's some unsavory episodes on there. And one thing you might like to purchase is a reasonable microphone. So I'm using today a blue microphone, and it just plugs in via USB. There's no CD required, it's just a plug and play. So that's my section. So without further ado, let's move on to Rebecca.
Hi, good afternoon. So I worked, I'm currently teaching in year 3, and I wanted to sort of have a look at developing my teaching of computing, which is something I think sometimes teachers can shy away from, a little bit sort of worried about how certain programs are going to work. So I chose branching databases, but linking it to climate change. And I think climate change is fantastic because it's a really good anchor to make the learning more meaningful and memorable for the children. There's a lot of focus at the moment about children knowing and remembering more. So certainly it's something that they can hook into, and then as soon as they've got that information, then they can then look at manipulating it in different ways, which is why branching databases I felt was good. We need to, one of the main things though is obviously you're teaching two things. You're teaching the subject knowledge of climate change, but you also need to teach the skills that are required to build a branching database. And that's when prior knowledge is really, really important for the children, and where they can draw on it. So they either have to have had it previously taught to them, or you need to be able to facilitate that in the planning, because it then makes the actual the skill element a lot easier for them, because they're not trying to manage too many different things, but also it makes it much easier for them to be able to focus on one skill or one element. So I wanted to make sure with my class we hadn't done a lot on climate change, and I wanted to look at a way to anchor that knowledge from something that they could have possibly learned more about. So most years in primary school do animals, including humans, in their science. So a lot of children are familiar with the habitats of animals, and also when you come into year 3 you look at their diets and what they need to survive, and that it doesn't take much of a jump to get to how the ecosystems are affected with climate change, etc. So we started off our learning there, and then we moved on. Richard, could I have the next slide? Thank you. So when I looked at creating a sequence of lessons, I went to Teach Computing, the National Centre for Computing Education, because they have set structures already, sequences there that you can use, which are really, really good. And they cover things, for instance, with branching databases, of how to look for yes and no questions, how to identify the attributes of the different elements within your database. So these different skills that you can teach to children, and it sets it out in a really manageable way. I was just really aware again of the fact that we needed to make sure their prior knowledge of climate change was sufficient enough that they could then easily make yes and no questions and easily identify different attributes. So I built in a research lesson, which again can also be another element of your computing curriculum, by looking at online research, by looking at how to use Google, what's reliable sources, you know, is Wikipedia reliable? All of these questions that also link into character education and lots of other things as well, just by taking climate change as your subject for research. So we looked at online research, topic books, fact sheets, all sorts of things like that. We came up with a little video that they looked at by the United Nations actually, and also throughout this you want to be looking at ensuring that your work is differentiated and suitable to the needs of your classroom. So I adapted the research and the exercises that were involved to make sure that I wasn't overfacing the children. We were looking at 5 animals possibly, and really learning that information in detail, so that when we got to the branching database, which is J2E database, it's so easy, but it's easier if they know how to manipulate the information. So I created a research template. MA is for my middle ability, so we watched the video and were provided with key sentences to match and copy into the relevant sections. High ability, they made notes and then completed their own table. Low ability, we gave them pictures and sentences to stick in. So I identified the different animals just from that video. We looked at the habitat, and we looked at how they're affected by climate change, because habitat obviously is one of their attributes, but we also looked at things like what do they eat, do they lay eggs, all little things like this, so that we could start to then build our database based on those attributes of those different animals. And obviously you can select that or change that to whatever your classroom needs are. You might have less animals, you might have more animals, you might have the children doing different things. The building, so this was the final database, so J2E, and this is how we sort of went through the process of the structure of lessons. And we looked at the class grouping the animals and how we could group them, what would be our yes and no questions that were relevant to different animals. We chose that you would go through the flow of the database, and at the end it would give you the impact of how they were being affected by climate change. But for your higher ability, you might decide that they've done this, but then perhaps can you think of another way of structuring your database as a sort of next step or as an extension? Because once they start to get used to those yes and no questions and identifying the different attributes of the animals, they then can sort of take that to any subject, but it's just about having the knowledge in the subject first to get the best out of the activity that you want to do. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, both of you, Rebecca and Richard, for sharing lots of really good ideas there. We've got a very good question come through from Emma, who's been watching today, and it's about buying sort of kit, especially around sort of the topic of climate change, and how we sort of square up the decision to buy new kit that could be made out of, you know, finite materials like plastics, at a time when we're obviously trying to move away from reliance on materials and resources that use those kinds of materials. So firstly, sort of to pitch the question exactly as it is, it says, how do you square buying new kit, for example, plastic kit using finite materials, when you're focusing on climate change as a topic?
Can I answer that first? I think firstly, that's why I said it's best just to buy one of them, and then you could start to think about how that could be adapted, and they could even write to the company. So if you think of the one I showed before, you could make the wind, the fan out of the fan blades out of wood. So I do see an awful lot of stuff in cupboards, and a lot of it is plastic based. So my solution would just be buy one, evaluate it, perhaps look at the source of those materials, the background to that company, not buy 15 at a time.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, and that's really good advice. I think looking at especially that idea of getting children to write to the companies and try and propose better changes to materials. Again, another really good cross-curricular link there to the science about looking at materials and what different materials can replace others, especially finite materials like plastic. Well, with the time that we've got left, I think we'll say thank you to everyone who's come along to join today. Thank you to Rebecca and thank you to Richard. Emma says thank you as well for the answer to her question there. And I'll finish off just by saying a couple of quick messages about CAS Inspire and the things that we've got coming up later on this year. So thank you to Rebecca and Richard and to the audience for joining us today. Please can I encourage you to share any highlights from today's session on social media and on the CAS website using the hashtag CAS Inspire. At the end of this webinar, a short survey will appear on the screen, and we'd be very grateful if you could take a minute to complete that survey. Please continue to spread the word about CAS Inspire. We're hosting further sessions all the way through 2022. And we have our last primary session of the term next week, which will be CAS Inspire, ensuring progression in Scratch. So do please join us for that, same time and same place. The CAS website has the links and information for all of that stuff. Once again, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Richard. And
thank you.
Before we go completely, Rebecca and Richard, do you want to just, I can see you've got your contact details on the slide, but do you have Twitter handles you'd also like to share?
Yeah, so it's Amazing ICT, at Amazing ICT, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Fantastic.
No, I don't, I'm afraid.
You've kept clear of that. Yeah, I respect that. We're busy enough as teachers as it is. But Richard, I know you've got a great, history of using social media with your Amaze ICT stuff. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.